Today, we're traveling to the heart of the medieval world, Jerusalem, in a time of knights, castles, and crusades. But this isn't just a story of holy war and epic sieges. It's the remarkable tale of a teenage king, stricken with leprosy, who defied the odds to defend his kingdom against one of the most legendary rulers in history, Saladin. Before we jump into this epic story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community, so you never miss out on our deep dives into history's greatest tales. The summer of 1176 marked a turning point for the Kingdom of Jerusalem, while Saladin, the ambitious Sultan of Egypt and Syria, was occupied with internal strife near Aleppo, battling his Zengid rivals and fending off the shadowy assassins. An unexpected force was rising in Jerusalem itself. Baldwin IV, known to history as the Leper King, reached maturity and took the reins of power from his regent. Baldwin IV's ascent was remarkable, not least because of the disease he bore. Diagnosed with leprosy as a boy, many predicted his reign would be short and ineffective. Yet Baldwin, defiant and sharp-minded, refused to let illness determine his fate. Upon assuming full royal authority, his first act was bold. He overturned his regent's policy of conciliation, rejecting a peace treaty with Saladin that might have bought the kingdom time, but risked its long-term survival. Instead, Baldwin's strategy was proactive, almost reckless for someone so young and ailing. He struck out from Jerusalem, leading raids against Saladin's territories around Damascus. This was not merely an act of youthful bravado, but a calculated move. Baldwin understood that allowing Saladin unchecked expansion in Syria would ultimately doom the fragile Crusader state. To ensure success, Baldwin surrounded himself with able men, none more trusted than his uncle, Jocelyn of Courtenay. As seneschal, Jocelyn would prove instrumental, loyal, pragmatic, and a steady hand amid chaos. This loyalty was crucial, as Baldwin's campaigns repeatedly forced Saladin to abandon his ambitions in Syria, and instead broker uneasy truces with old foes, such as the Zengids. As Saladin dealt with the fallout from a failed assassination attempt by the feared Nizari Ismailis, the assassins, who had even infiltrated his trusted Mamluk guard, the Kingdom of Jerusalem seized opportunities. Baldwin's forces, often joined by allies like Raymond III of Tripoli, launched devastating raids into the fertile Bekaa Valley. These were not mere skirmishes, but carefully planned assaults that drew Saladin's attention away from greater conquests, such as Aleppo. In 1176, Saladin's nephew, Tughtakin ibn Ayyub, often called Taran Shah, tried to repel the Franks, but suffered defeat at the Battle of Baalbek, further stalling Ayyubid ambitions. Each time Saladin attempted to consolidate power, Baldwin's knights forced him to reconsider his plans. Realizing that castles were as critical as armies, Baldwin oversaw the construction and reinforcement of key fortresses along the kingdom's vulnerable frontiers. In 1177, he granted Reynald of Châtillon, one of the era's most notorious warlords, the strategic fortress of Kerak. From there, Reynald threatened Saladin's crucial supply lines between Egypt and Syria, becoming a persistent thorn in the Sultan's side. Baldwin also negotiated alliances beyond Christendom, most notably with the Byzantine Emperor Manuel I Komnenos, who agreed to recognize Baldwin's kingdom in exchange for spiritual leadership over Eastern Christians. Such diplomatic ties brought temporary security, but also new complexities. When Count Philip of Flanders, a powerful and wealthy noble, arrived in the Holy Land in 1177, Baldwin saw hope for relief, not only as a crusader, but perhaps as a successor, given Baldwin's worsening health. Philip, however, declined both the crown and any campaigns against Egypt, preferring to focus on Syria and personal pilgrimage. Despite this setback, Baldwin mustered what troops he could and prepared for the inevitable: Saladin's counterstrike. In late 1177, With most Frankish forces tied up in the north, Saladin amassed a massive army. Sources claim between 12,000 and 26,000 cavalry. He crossed into the kingdom with visions of capturing Jerusalem itself. Baldwin, gravely outnumbered, retreated to the fortified city of Ascalon. Rallying the Knights Templar and his most trusted nobles, including Balian of Ibelin and Reynald of Châtillon, Baldwin marched out to confront Saladin near Montgisard. The ensuing battle was legendary. Against all odds, Baldwin led a desperate charge, wielding the True Cross as his banner. Saladin's army, scattered in search of plunder, was caught off guard and routed. The Sultan himself narrowly escaped, pursued deep into the Sinai. The victory saved the kingdom, electrified Christian Europe, and cemented Baldwin's reputation as one of the most courageous leaders of his age. Yet peace was fleeting. Famine and plague repeatedly struck the Levant, weakening both Christian and Muslim armies. Saladin, undeterred, rebuilt his forces. Baldwin, meanwhile, deepened his reliance on allies, rewarding vassals and preparing defences. He granted Reynald the authority to harass Saladin's caravans, an action that would have dire consequences in the years to come. Baldwin also spearheaded the construction of the formidable fortress at Jacob's Ford on the upper Jordan River, a strategic bulwark against invasion from Damascus. When Saladin offered an astronomical ransom for its demolition, Baldwin refused. The Sultan instead laid siege, ultimately capturing and destroying the stronghold in 1179, dealing a serious blow to Jerusalem's defences. In 1179, a new clash erupted at Marj Ayun. At first, the Crusaders struck with their usual boldness, but Saladin's tactical genius turned the tide. Many Franks, including the Grand Master of the Templars, were captured or killed. Baldwin himself, weakened by leprosy, barely escaped alive. The Sultan followed this with a brutal assault on Jacob's Ford, slaughtering defenders and sending survivors into slavery. Muslim chroniclers and European monks alike noted the horror of the defeat. Despite these reversals, Baldwin IV's resilience remained unbroken. He personally led men in the field, sometimes having to be carried into battle, always refusing to yield to illness or despair. Yet his body was failing. By the end of 1179, his condition had worsened drastically. Recognizing his own mortality, Baldwin began to arrange the succession and shore up the kingdom's internal unity, even as Saladin's power reached new heights across Egypt and Syria. The struggle between Baldwin IV and Saladin would shape the destiny of the Crusader states for decades. Baldwin's short reign was marked by both dazzling victories and devastating losses. His resolve, and that of his barons and Templar allies, bought Jerusalem precious time. Yet as Baldwin's body weakened, so did the kingdom's prospects. Saladin, now unchallenged in his domains, was poised to launch the campaigns that would culminate in the legendary siege and fall of Jerusalem itself in 1187. The age of Crusader glory was not yet over, but the balance of power was shifting inexorably toward the east. The fall of Jacob's Ford in 1179 was a heavy blow to the Kingdom of Jerusalem's defences, but by the dawn of 1180, a far greater crisis overshadowed the realm: the failing health of its monarch. King Baldwin IV, barely 19, was beset by the relentless advance of leprosy. His strength was fading, and the shadow of death loomed closer each day. Determined to protect the fragile kingdom he had fought so hard to defend, Baldwin turned his attention to the future, specifically to securing a stable succession. Central to this was his younger sister, Sibylla, the designated heir. Baldwin's efforts to find her a suitable husband had stalled, despite diplomatic overtures to the great noble houses of France. Meanwhile, Sibylla herself had set her heart on a young knight already present at the Jerusalem court, Guy of Lusignan. Guy's family had deep Crusader roots, and his elder brother Amaury was a trusted ally of Baldwin's own mother, Agnes. It was Agnes who championed Guy's cause, suggesting that he might be the right match for the princess. Despite concerns from some quarters, including the chronicler William of Tyre, who believed the marriage was too hasty, Baldwin pressed forward. Years of fruitless negotiations had produced no alternative, and Guy was young, energetic, and crucially, had already captured Sibylla's affection. The union was also politically shrewd. Guy's family ties reached all the way to the powerful Plantagenet dynasty in England. By binding Jerusalem's fate to such a mighty Western house, Baldwin hoped to strengthen the kingdom's standing in the eyes of Europe's kings. Yet, there was more to Baldwin's decision than meets the eye. The political landscape within the Crusader court was fracturing. A rival faction, led by Raymond III of Tripoli and Bohemond III of Antioch, was rumoured to be plotting to take control of Jerusalem by marrying Sibylla to a candidate of their choosing. The new alliance with Guy was a preemptive strike, securing Sibylla's position and undercutting his rivals. It also complicated matters. Sibylla already had a young son, Prince Baldwin, who stood next in line for the throne, making the question of succession all the more delicate. By 1180, these rivalries hardened into open factionalism. On one side stood Baldwin, his mother, his uncle Jocelyn, Sibylla, Guy, and Reynald of Châtillon, united by kinship and loyalty to the king. Opposing them were Raymond, Bohemond, the influential Ibelline family, and Queen Maria Comnene, Baldwin's stepmother. Baldwin, always shrewd, recognized the danger of this split and resolved to remain on the throne as long as he was physically able, hoping to heal the divisions before he died. As spring approached, Baldwin moved to solidify the kingdom's stability by seeking a 2-year truce with Saladin. The Sultan, embroiled in conflicts with the rising Seljuk Turks and wary of antagonizing the powerful Byzantine Empire, readily agreed. This breathing space allowed Baldwin to maneuver politically at home. To neutralize his rivals, he betrothed his half-sister Isabella to Humphrey IV of Tauron, binding another important noble family more closely to the royal cause. Isabella, still a child, was sent to the formidable castle of Kerak, deep within loyalist territory, where she would come of age under the watchful eye of her future mother-in-law, Stephanie of Milly. Around this time, the Knights Templar welcomed a new Grand Master, Reynald of Châtillon, a veteran of the Spanish Reconquista and a man handpicked by the Pope. His arrival promised a new chapter in the Order's storied history in the Holy Land. Meanwhile, seismic changes rocked the Eastern world. The death of the Byzantine Emperor Manuel Komnenos left a power vacuum, soon filled by Andronicus Komnenos, a figure infamous for his ruthlessness. Anti-Western riots swept Constantinople, with Latin inhabitants slaughtered and hospitals ransacked. The Byzantine court, once an important backer of Jerusalem, was now hostile. The Crusader kingdom, already isolated, found itself even more vulnerable. Despite his declining health, Baldwin pressed on. He issued royal decrees that named Sibylla and Guy as his official heirs and worked to reconcile the great nobles, even convincing Raymond and Guy to cooperate in the royal court. For a brief moment, it seemed that the kingdom's leadership was once again united, but this fragile peace would not last. By 1182, Saladin had rebuilt his armies and expanded his naval power, fielding up to 40 war galleys. Meanwhile, in the north, the last Zengid ruler of Aleppo died, passing the city to his cousin of Mosul in a desperate bid to keep Saladin at bay. Saladin responded by dispatching his nephew, Farrukh Shah, to prevent the transfer of power. At this critical juncture, Reynald of Châtillon, ever the opportunist, struck. Launching a daring raid from his fortress at Kerak, he swept through the Arabian desert, attacking caravans and threatening Muslim pilgrimage routes. The psychological impact was enormous. Saladin's prestige was damaged, and his control over communications between Egypt and Syria was tested. While contemporary Muslim chroniclers claimed Reynald planned a grand conquest, modern historians believe his goal was disruption, not domination. Crucially, Reynald's raid took place during a period of truce, a fact not lost on Saladin, who protested bitterly to Baldwin. Yet it's likely Reynald acted with the king's blessing. Baldwin's strategic aim was clear: to prevent Saladin from seizing Aleppo and consolidating his rule over all of Syria. The breach of the truce reflected the harsh realities of Crusader diplomacy. Both sides knew peace was only a temporary reprieve. By spring, Saladin prepared to answer these provocations with force. He marched out from Cairo, drawing his armies north. Baldwin gathered his forces, moving to intercept Saladin near Kerak. Both sides maneuvered, probing for weaknesses, but avoided direct confrontation. Meanwhile, more troubling news arrived from Constantinople. Andronicus Komnenos had slaughtered the last remaining pro-Crusader members of the imperial family. With Byzantine aid now out of reach, Saladin could launch his campaigns without fear of Christian intervention from the east. The stage was set for another dramatic confrontation. In July 1182, Saladin attacked the fortress of Bethsan, slaughtering or enslaving its defenders and raiding deep into Galilee. Baldwin, though desperately ill, led his army into battle at La Forbie, repelling Saladin's forces once more. Though not as spectacular as Montgisard, this victory was enough to preserve the kingdom, at least for a while longer. Saladin's ambitions did not waver. After regrouping, he launched a naval assault on Beirut, hoping to starve the Crusader coast into submission. Baldwin, refusing to split his forces, held firm at Tyre, relying on local garrisons and a fleet of Italian ships. Eventually, Saladin withdrew, but the damage to Jerusalem's economic base was severe. That autumn, Saladin turned north, expanding his dominion across former Zengid lands. Yet the Crusaders did not stand idle. Baldwin and Raymond struck back, launching raids around Damascus and Basra, disrupting Saladin's plans and gathering crucial intelligence about enemy strength. Both sides, battered and bloodied, were locked in a deadly game of attrition. Each campaign, each raid, pushed the region closer to the brink, and as winter set in, Baldwin's body weakened further. But the kingdom's greatest gamble was yet to come. For Reynald of Châtillon was preparing one of the boldest moves in the entire history of the Crusades, one that would change the fate of Jerusalem forever. One of Baldwin's most audacious vassals, Reynald of Châtillon, staged a daring campaign from his desert fortress at Kerak. Under his orders, Crusader craftsmen constructed 5 warships, an immense effort requiring carpenters, sailors, and resources from distant coastal cities. With Baldwin's likely approval and support, these ships were dismantled, carried across the desert by camel, and reassembled on the shores of the Gulf of Aqaba. It was a move no one had anticipated. For the first time since the Muslim conquest of Egypt, Christian warships entered the Red Sea. Reynald's fleet, crewed by Arab pilots familiar with these perilous waters, quickly seized the initiative. 2 ships blockaded the Muslim stronghold on Pharaoh's Island, while Reynald's own land forces laid siege to Isla. The other 3 galleys launched a campaign of terror, sacking the port of Aidab, crowded with pilgrims on their way to Mecca, and ravaging over a dozen merchant ships along the coast. Word soon spread that these raiders might even threaten Mecca itself. Panic gripped the region. Saladin responded with uncharacteristic speed, sending his brother Al-Adil with a fleet from Egypt to hunt down the Christian intruders. While Reynald and his land forces retreated to Transjordan, some of the Christian sailors escaped. but most of the ships were destroyed and the crews captured. These prisoners were paraded through Egypt's cities before being executed, a warning from Saladin to any would-be challengers. Historians like Andrew Jatishki argue that Saladin's swift response did much to cement his reputation as Islam's champion. Yet, for many in the Muslim world, the raid was a humiliation, proof that Saladin's preoccupation with the Zengids had left vital holy routes exposed. The Zengids themselves had long accused him of waging an illegitimate war for power in Syria, and this episode only fueled those resentments. Bernard Hamilton notes that Reynald's actions exposed Saladin's inability to protect the Hajj, damaging his image among some contemporaries. Meanwhile, the Crusader kingdom itself was reeling. Baldwin convened his high court in February 1183 and, recognizing the gravity of the situation, a general tax was levied to pay for the kingdom's defences. Chroniclers like William of Tyre recorded that the king's illness had reached new extremes, his sight gone, his limbs nearly useless, and his body racked by disease. Many urged Baldwin to step down, but the young king refused to relinquish his duties. His spirit, they said, seemed only to grow stronger as his body failed. That spring, Saladin renewed his campaign in Syria. His earlier victories had cut Aleppo off from Mosul, and with the city isolated, he set about starving it into submission. Imad ad-Din, the Zengid governor of Aleppo, had little choice but to negotiate. In June 1183, after a long siege, Aleppo surrendered to Saladin, a momentous event that marked the collapse of Zengid power in Syria and the zenith of Saladin's own empire. For the Kingdom of Jerusalem, news of Aleppo's fall was like a gathering storm. Baldwin, bedridden and unable to ride, placed his faith in his commanders. The kingdom's great barons, Raymond III of Tripoli and Bohemond III of Antioch among them, sent knights and funds to bolster the army. Mercenaries were hired to swell the ranks. In total, some 1,300 cavalry and 15,000 infantry were mustered, but Baldwin himself could only watch from Nazareth, feverish and near death. With Saladin now stronger than ever and marching west, the future looked grim. Knowing his time was short, Baldwin made a critical choice. He named Guy of Lusignan, his sister Sibylla's husband, as regent. The king insisted on strict conditions. Guy had to swear never to seek the crown in Baldwin's lifetime, nor to give away or alienate any royal possessions. William of Tyre was sceptical of Guy's abilities, calling him unequal to the challenge, but the barons complied, pledging loyalty to the new regent. For Guy, this was his moment to prove himself, but his lack of experience was glaring. He had yet to lead a major campaign. In September 1183, Saladin's forces massed south of Damascus and crossed the Jordan, ravaging the countryside. The Crusader army moved to intercept, maintaining iron discipline on the march. Despite repeated provocations and cavalry skirmishes, Guy refused to be drawn into open battle. For 9 days, both armies faced off, neither side committing to a decisive engagement. Low on supplies, Saladin finally retreated, leaving behind a devastated landscape, but no great victory. Baldwin, however, was dissatisfied. He believed Guy had squandered an opportunity to strike a crippling blow against Saladin. Dissolving the regency, Baldwin reclaimed full royal authority, and relations between the king and Guy soured further. With the kingdom's army fully mobilized and the threat from Saladin looming, Baldwin felt a decisive battle should have been fought. Events now moved quickly. On November 20th, 1183, Baldwin crowned his 5-year-old nephew, Prince Baldwin, as co-king Baldwin V, ensuring the succession would bypass Guy in case of his own death. Reynald III of Tripoli and other powerful nobles gave their support. The king also began quietly working to annul Sibylla's marriage to Guy, further isolating the regent. But the crisis was not over. Saladin soon launched another invasion, besieging Kerak, Reynald's imposing desert fortress. Baldwin, despite being blind and unable to ride, led his men from a litter at the head of the army. The Christian forces pressed on, carrying the relic of the true cross before them. Upon learning that the Crusaders were approaching, Saladin abandoned the siege. Guy, meanwhile, had withdrawn to Ascalon, fearful that Baldwin would separate him from Sibylla. The tension between the two men deepened. Baldwin pursued Guy to Ascalon, demanding his submission, but Guy refused. The king was forced to assert his authority by entering other cities, removing Guy's supporters, and formally stripping him of lands and power in a council at Acre. The high court was divided. Some still supported Guy, hoping to keep peace among the fractious nobility. Meanwhile, Baldwin sent an embassy to Europe, appealing directly to Henry II of England, his powerful relative, for a new crusade. Henry had already given financial aid, but Baldwin hoped for direct intervention to tip the balance against Saladin. By the summer of 1184, Saladin renewed his siege of Kerak, and Baldwin, carried on a litter, ever the determined leader, marched again to relieve the castle. Once more, Saladin was forced to retreat, plundering the countryside, but failing to capture Kerak. The king oversaw repairs to the fortress, subsidizing its defences from his own treasury. But Guy, still holed up in Ascalon, lashed out in frustration, raiding Bedouin tribes who were vital allies of the kingdom. This recklessness underscored for many just how unsuited Guy was for rule. As 1184 ended, Baldwin's health collapsed further. The High Court convened around his bedside. It was clear that the king was dying. In early 1185, Baldwin dictated his will. The assembled lords agreed that Guy should not serve as regent for the child king. Instead, Baldwin entrusted the regency to Reynald III of Tripoli, a proven leader with deep experience. The Templars and Hospitallers would control the kingdom's fortresses, and Jocelyn of Courtenay would serve as guardian for Baldwin V. In his last days, Baldwin IV had done all he could, securing the succession, dispatching envoys to the west, repairing vital strongholds, and keeping Guy from the throne. He died between March and May of 1185, not yet 24 years old. Baldwin was buried in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, beside his father, at the heart of the kingdom he had defended so fiercely. Baldwin IV's reign was marked by adversity, leprosy, political intrigue, and the rise of Saladin, perhaps the greatest Muslim ruler of the age. Yet again and again, Baldwin triumphed where others might have faltered. He was consistently outnumbered, yet under his leadership, the Crusader kingdom stood firm against the odds. Few monarchs have governed so effectively while battling such profound disability, or have so completely given themselves for the good of their people. His most celebrated victory at Montgisard, where a teenage king led a handful of Templars and knights to rout Saladin's much larger army, remains the enduring symbol of his reign. It stands as a testament to valour, resilience, and hope against the impossible. Even after his death, Baldwin the Leper King would be remembered as a figure of courage and faith, whose legacy continues to inspire. Thanks for joining us on this epic journey into the past. If you enjoyed the story of the Leper King and Saladin, hit that like button, subscribe for more untold history, and let us know in the comments, which moment of this clash did you find most dramatic? See you in the next adventure.